Why do the smallest changes feel so loud? Are Jungkook and Taehyung quietly facing something far bigger than anyone dares to say? What is ARMY really seeing between the lines? Before you read another sentence, pause and ask yourself this question. What if the biggest warning signs are never loud, never dramatic, never announced, but instead whispered through silence, through altered gazes, through moments that feel just slightly off? If you feel that tension too, don't keep it to yourself. Comment what you notice, like this article if it resonates, and subscribe so you don't miss the next piece of the puzzle ARMY is desperately trying to understand. Something has shifted. Not in a way that can be easily screenshotted. Not in a way that headlines can immediately confirm, but in a way that longtime observers feel in their bones. Jungkook and Taehyung have not changed loudly. They have changed quietly, subtly, almost politely, as if hoping no one would notice. And yet ARMY noticed anyway. Because ARMY always does. At first, it felt ridiculous to even think about it. A different tone of voice here, a longer pause there, a smile that arrives half a second late, eyes that seem to look through the camera instead of into it. These are human beings, after all. People grow. People get tired. People evolve. That was the rational explanation many fans clung to, because it was comfortable and safe. But comfort began to crack the more these small moments stacked on top of each other, forming a pattern that no longer felt accidental. Why does Jungkook speak with more restraint now, as if carefully measuring every word before letting it go? Why does Taehyung's gaze sometimes feel heavier, more inward, like someone carrying thoughts he cannot afford to share? These aren't accusations. They are questions. And questions are dangerous, because once they appear, they refuse to disappear. ARMY has always been trained to read between the lines. This fandom was built not just on music, but on storytelling, symbolism, and emotional honesty. BTS taught their listeners to look deeper, to listen harder, to question narratives instead of swallowing them whole. So when Jungkook and Taehyung began to show changes that felt emotionally coded rather than stylistic, it triggered a familiar instinct. Something is being said without words. The most unsettling part is not what we see but what we don't. There is a noticeable absence of certain energies that once came effortlessly. Laughter that used to spill out now feels controlled. Playfulness appears in flashes rather than floods. The bond between them, still present, still strong, now carries a quieter gravity, as if shaped by shared understanding rather than carefree joy. That kind of shift doesn't come from nothing. Some fans describe it as maturity, and yes, that is part of it. But maturity alone does not explain the emotional weight that seems to linger around them. Maturity does not usually look like someone bracing themselves before speaking, or exhaling slowly as if releasing thoughts they are not allowed to voice. This is where the unease creeps in. This is where ARMY starts asking the questions no one wants to ask out loud. Are they protecting something? Or are they protecting someone? Or are they protecting themselves? Every era of BTS has carried its own emotional texture, but this one feels different. It feels less like a chapter and more like a crossroads. Jungkook, once so openly expressive, now appears more guarded, as if learning the cost of transparency in real time. Taehyung, once known for wearing his emotions like art, now seems to hold them closer to his chest, revealing them only in fleeting glances or carefully chosen words. What happened to make them this careful? Fans replay interviews, rewatch live broadcasts, analyze lyrics not as entertainment but as potential confessions. And while no single moment provides a clear answer, the accumulation creates a sense of quiet alarm. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition. It is also deeply emotional, because ARMY does not watch from a distance. ARMY has grown up alongside these artists, celebrated their highs, cried through their lows, and learned to recognize when something feels wrong even if everything looks fine. That emotional bond is precisely why these subtle changes hurt more than any public controversy ever could. There is also fear woven into the concern. Fear of burnout. Fear of pressure. Fear of sacrifices being made behind closed doors that the world will never fully understand. When Jungkook speaks about responsibility now, it sounds heavier than before. When Taehyung reflects on life, his words feel layered, almost cautious, like someone who has learned that honesty can be both healing and dangerous. And yet, despite all of this, they continue. They smile. They perform. They reassure. Which raises another painful question. How much of what we see is reassurance for ARMY, and how much is armor for themselves? The shock is not in any single revelation, because there has been none. The shock is in the realization that silence itself can be loud, that absence can speak, that small changes, when placed under the microscope of love and loyalty, can feel like warning signs. Some fans resist this narrative entirely, and that resistance is understandable. No one wants to believe that artists who have given so much might be carrying unseen burdens. No one wants to imagine that behind the polished images and gentle words, there might be difficult realities they are not ready or allowed to share. Denial can feel kinder than speculation. But concern does not come from distrust. It comes from care. Jungkook and Taehyung have always communicated with their audience in ways that go beyond words. Through music, through silence, through presence. When that communication changes, it is natural for listeners to lean in closer, not to invade but to understand. The emotional tension ARMY feels right now is not about drama or scandal. It is about empathy. It is about sensing that two people who have carried enormous expectations for years may now be navigating a phase that requires more strength than ever before. A phase where every move is scrutinized, every expression interpreted, and every silence questioned. What makes this moment especially haunting is that there is no clear villain, no obvious conflict to point to. Just the slow realization that growth can be painful, that success can be isolating, and that even global icons are still human beings learning how to survive their own lives. Perhaps the biggest question of all is this: if they wanted us to notice, would they be this subtle? Or is the subtlety itself the message? ARMY continues to watch, not with entitlement but with concern. Not demanding answers, but hoping for reassurance that whatever Jungkook and Taehyung are facing, they are not facing it alone, that they have space to breathe, that they are allowed to change without losing themselves. Until clarity arrives, if it ever does, the fandom exists in this emotional in-between. Reading signs, connecting dots, feeling anxious without fully knowing why. And maybe that's the hardest part. Loving artists enough to sense their struggles, but respecting them enough to know that some truths are not ours to uncover. Still, the questions remain. The silence lingers, and the small changes continue to feel bigger than they should. What do you think ARMY is really seeing? Are these signs of growth, warning signals, or something far more complex that we don't yet have the language to name? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this article if it moved you, and subscribe so we can keep searching for answers together. The uneasiness doesn't fade with time. In fact, it grows quieter and heavier, settling into the spaces between moments where everything is supposed to feel normal. Jungkook laughs, but ARMY wonders what he's holding back. Taehyung smiles, but some fans feel that his eyes tell a different story. This is where the feeling becomes difficult to ignore, because it no longer lives in imagination. It lives in repetition. Every appearance becomes a mirror. Every silence feels amplified. When Jungkook speaks about the future, his tone carries responsibility more than excitement, as if he is already calculating consequences before allowing himself to dream out loud. When Taehyung reflects on art, life, or growth, his words sound layered, poetic but also cautious, like someone who has learned that vulnerability must now be rationed. ARMY begins to ask the hardest question of all. When did they stop feeling light? This isn't about blaming schedules, companies, or circumstances directly. It's about recognizing the invisible weight that comes with longevity in the spotlight. Jungkook and Taehyung are no longer just artists chasing dreams. They are symbols, anchors, expectations made human. That transformation doesn't happen without cost. And sometimes the cost shows itself not in breakdowns, but in restraint.